When I was in high school, I found this battered, tattered David Bowie record and fell in love with it. Ziggy Stardust, the motion picture soundtrack, still one of my favorite albums. But whenever I told someone I was listening to David Bowie, they'd always say, "Oh, did you see that movie, The Labyrinth?" No, sorry, I didn't. Was it good? David Bowie was in it with really tight pants and this bulge in his crotch. Well, I didn't see it. Then they'd say, "So you like David Bowie with his bulging pants?" And I'd hopelessly say, again, I didn't see the movie. I have a record, there's a picture of his face, but really the melodies, the lyrics. But the conversation was over, because whoever I'd been speaking to was already off to tell the next person that Snodgrass likes David Bowie's tight pants. Anyway, that was my first impression of the word labyrinth, in which all passageways lead to. And really, now I come to realize it wasn't me. But everyone I knew was obsessed with David Bowie's pants. But the labyrinth, not the Muppet movie, but the maze of the Minotaur, did become the center of a research study I did in 2015. And now it's the 10-year anniversary of my book. Well, to me, it's called The Minotaur. But that title was already taken by a lot of weird, erotic fantasy fiction. So, as a joke, I titled it Romancing the Minotaur. And that's been fun to live with. Anyway, since I've been podcasting about animals, I thought it'd be fun to share a chapter of this book about a mythical, magical, cannibal animal man. One of the earliest visual representations of the Minotaur is an engraving on a tiny gold ornament crafted about 2,700 years ago. The image centers on a muscular hero in a jockstrap, gripping the horn of a bull-headed man while plunging a blade into his armpit. The Minotaur on the right stands a little shorter than the hero, with the head of a bull or stag. Naked, except for a belt and bracelet, his right hand hooks the hero's wrist and his left hand grips the blade. While the engraving is small and hard to read, it really looks like the Minotaur is guiding the blade into himself, not pushing it away. There's no aggression or fear in the scene. The hero is not low in a driving lunge. The Minotaur is not bent in defense or defeat. Behind the hero stands a muscular topless woman wearing an elaborately patterned skirt and headband. One hand hovers open just behind the hero's head, while the other is poised to pinch his heroic backside or adjust his jockstrap. It's not exactly clear what her hand is doing down there. But her outstretched arms convey guidance and protection. The hero is under her control. If we stared long enough into the scene, the central figure would fade into the background. The interaction is between the topless woman and the bull-headed man, and the hero is a puppet, pushed by the woman, pulled by the Minotaur. This ornament was manufactured far from the scene of the Minotaur showdown, about 700 years after Theseus lived. Later representations would show significant variations. The monster becomes larger and its head more clearly bullish, its bodily stature crouching, dodging, or counterattacking, sometimes holding a boulder. In some depictions, Theseus fights a bull that's not half man at all, giving rise to a separate legend of his battle with the bull at Marathon. Some depictions show only the two fighters, while others will surround them with the Cretan princess Ariana and the goddess Athena and a bunch of teenagers. 1,000 years after the event, an Athenian commemorative coin would feature the Minotaur on one side with a stylized maze on the reverse. The lack of setting in earlier depictions makes it unclear whether the dungeon maze was always part of the story. No trace of such a structure has been found in the ruins of ancient Crete where the story takes place, although the palace of Knossos was itself a maze of corridors and chambers, and its symbol was a double-bladed axe, or labrys, from which we get the word labyrinth. A bull story, or animal husbandry. There are no photographs or videos of the Minotaur fight, no eyewitness reports in newspapers, and if Theseus himself had written a blog post about his Cretan island safari, how reliable would we consider his report? The earliest comprehensive Minotaur narratives were written centuries after the fall of classical Greece by Romans who compiled sensational fragments of tall tales for cheap lowbrow entertainment. The writings are a bit cartoonish, with a boyish fixation on lewd and supernatural elements. We could consider these the locker room versions of the story. The following basic Minotaur narrative has been assembled with pieces from Ovid, Plutarch, and Pseudo-Apollodorus, all produced in or around the 1st century of the Common Era, about 1,500 years after the event. The story begins like many other ancient myths. A wise and mighty Olympian deity is overpowered with lust while spying on some comely teenager, in this sense the broad-faced Syrian princess Europa. The name of the deity in Ovid's account is Zeus, but his description of the earth-shaking god with the 3-pronged spear will sound more like the ocean deity Poseidon, who will be central in the rest of the story, so it's possible that Zeus was a later replacement. Ovid wrote, "The father of all gods, whose right hand held a 3-pronged thunderbolt, whose slightest nod was an earthquake up to heaven, dropped his royal scepter and became a bull, with huge silky muscles at his neck and silver dewlaps hanging, small horns, as white as if a sculptor's hand had cut them out of pearl. Europa went to him with a gift of daisies to his snow-white lips. He was all joy, tasting the future as he kissed her hands, nor could he straightly control his love. He danced in the grasses and rolled his whiteness into golden sands until the princess climbed to his back. Slowly, the god stepped out into the shallows of the beach, and with false-footed softness took to sea, swimming against full tide, the girl, his captured prize. She, fearful, turned to shoreward, set one hand on his broad back, the other held one horn. Her dress behind her fluttered in the wind." The white bull landed with Europa on the island of Crete, where he did what Greek gods do. One of the triplets conceived was called Minos. Apollodorus wrote, "Minos wanted to be king of Crete, but there was opposition. He claimed that he had received the kingship from the gods, and to prove it, he said that whatever he prayed for would happen. He made a sacrifice to Poseidon and prayed for a bull to appear from the depths, promising to sacrifice the one that appeared. Poseidon sent a magnificent bull for him, and he received the kingdom, but he sent the bull to his herds and sacrificed another. Poseidon grew angry at Minos because he did not sacrifice the bull, so he made it savage and made Minos' wife, Pasiphae, lust after the bull." Determined to consummate this bestial union, the Cretan queen approached an inventor named Daedalus. Apollodorus wrote, "He constructed a wooden cow, put it on wheels, and hollowed it out. Stripping the skin from a cow, he sewed it around the wooden one, and he placed it in the meadow where the bull usually grazed, and put Pasiphae inside. The bull came and mated with it. And so the Minotaur was born. Minos then forced the inventor to imprison this hulking, sulking creature in a maze that no one could find their way out of. Poseidon's bull continued to terrorize the Cretans until Heracles dragged it off the island to Marathon near Athens, and there it terrorized the Athenians. Apparently, it had also learned to breathe fire. Years later, Minos' son visited Athens, and the king was so impressed with this Cretan prince's athleticism that he challenged him to hunt the bull. The prince was slain, and Minos, enraged, ordered that every 9 years, or some sources say every year, the Athenians had to send a group of teenagers to be sealed in the maze and eaten by the monster. Enter Theseus, the Athenian king's illegitimate son from a drunken one-night stand, who delighted the Athenians by killing Poseidon's raging bull, then offered to rid them of the Minotaur. He set sail with the next batch of Athenian youth. Apollodorus narrates, "When he arrived in Crete, Minos' daughter Ariana fell in love with him and offered to help him if he promised to take her back to Athens and make her his wife. After Theseus promised and swore oaths on it, she asked the inventor, Daedalus, to reveal the way out of the labyrinth. At his suggestion, she gave a thread to Theseus as he entered. Theseus tied this to the door and went in, dragging it behind. He found the Minotaur in the innermost part of the labyrinth and beat him to death with his fists. He got out by following the thread back." The old Saxon word for a ball of yarn is clew, C-L-E-W, from which we get the modern word clue. Theseus sabotaged the mighty Cretan fleet, then set sail with the princess Ariana and the Athenian teenagers. They landed on a small island, but what happened next is an ancient mystery. Mythographers generally agree that he assaulted, then abandoned the princess. Some say she then hanged herself, others say that she was discovered unconscious by the wine god Dionysus, who took her to be his immortal bride. Whatever happened, Theseus did not keep his promise to the princess, although there are multiple reports that Theseus did later marry Ariana's sister Phaedra, who also apparently hanged herself. Nobody says that Theseus was the greatest of Greek heroes. Even in classical Greece, he was generally considered a half-assed Heracles, having literally lost half his ass on a botched kidnapping mission in Hades. He then had to be rescued by the real Heracles. The guy who chopped off Medusa's head and used it to rescue the princess from the sea monster in Clash of the Titans? That was Perseus. The guy who escaped the Cyclops, Circe, and the Sirens? That was Odysseus. The Trojan War? Achilles. Every Greek legend you've ever heard that wasn't about the Minotaur was someone else, not Theseus. Even Theseus' arch-nemesis, the Minotaur, has had to abandon his old sparring partner to find work elsewhere to stay current, recently accepting cameo roles in Hollywood productions about Perseus. Dissing Theseus has not hurt the Minotaur's career, but losing touch with his native Crete reduces the Minotaur to a mindless movie monster, although he was particularly terrifying when Jack Nicholson played him in The Shining, chasing his son through the maze. Surprisingly, we've yet to see a reality show in which the Minotaur dances the tango or moves in with Vanilla Ice. So why write a book about Theseus and the Minotaur? Well, not to spoil the ending, but the book is not really about Theseus and the Minotaur at all. As a student of Daniel Quinn, I study what it means to be human and how that has changed since the transition from migratory foragers to settled farmers. I'm particularly interested in how social and gender dynamics have been shaped by this transition. And while reading Robert Graves and James Frazier and Rianne Eisler and Joseph Campbell, I was struck by three topics. One, Crete, an advanced ancient civilization ruled primarily by women. Two, ancient kings who were sacrificed after a year in power. And three, barbaric invaders who overran ancient matriarchal cultures and the vestiges of feminine power that remained. At some point in the study, I was reminded of the Minotaur story, an ideal frame for linking these three topics. Also, having just moved to Buffalo, New York, I see totem bison heads everywhere, sometimes with human bodies. And so the book, Romancing the Minotaur, is in three sections, corresponding with the three central figures in the Minotaur story. The first explores the Cretan queen priestess and princess apprentice, and how these two characters are actually a single figure at different stages of life, and how she fits into the cultural context of ancient Crete. The second section of the book explores the Cretan king Minos and the Minotaur, which literally means the Minos bull, and how they represent a merger of Cretan island culture with the barbaric mainland culture. The third section of the book is about Theseus as a representation of the barbaric warriors who finally destroyed the matriarchal utopia of Crete, incorporating elements of it into what would later develop into classical Greek culture. When we return to the Minotaur story at the end of the book, we'll see it with more depth and clarity, and rather than classify it as fact or fairy tale, we'll see that it contains a certain truth about this historical transition. Copies of Romancing the Minotaur can be found pretty much wherever, or, if you run into me, I've probably got one in the trunk of the car.